Welcome back to Making Money Matter, ladies and gentlemen. Got something hot off the press for you today. Christian Easterday, he's the Managing Director and CEO of Hot Chili. ASX code is HCH. Now, they have put together, now, Christian's the founder of Hot Chili. And I want you all to understand, I've spoken about this before, you just don't turn on a copper tap. It's going to take a while. Now, these guys listed in 2010. But I want you to listen to the end because they announced something today which had not only me sitting up and taking notice, but the market likes it as well. Share price up about 10% today as I talked to you on Tuesday, the 11th of February. That's when the announcement came out. Christian very kindly has set aside some time for you, our beautiful audience, to tell us what's happening. Now, I've seen Christian in the past at the Rick Brawl conference, which I all talked to you about. You should all be there. That's in Boca Raton in July. And Rick loves Hot Chili. Why? Because he says what you do is you make money from big projects. This is a very big project. Now, as I said, Christian was the founder, 16 years to the day. So you got to be a little bit patient here, don't you, Christian? And congratulations, because you've copped it in the past. You know, why aren't you finding it more quickly, et cetera, et cetera. But I truly think that not only have you got a tiger by the tail, but I'm wearing my gold jacket today because you've also potentially, this is a copper play, and that's what I always understood it at. There's also a lot of gold there as well. So before we get started, first time on Making Money Matter, just explain a big overview, and then I want to go into what today's announcement means for everyone, and clearly the market likes it. So brief overview of Hot Chili.
Yeah, thank you very much, Kerry, and great to chat, and looking forward to spending time at Rick's conference with you in a few months' time. But yeah, no, as you said, I'm the CEO and Managing Director of Hot Chili, and founded the company back with our original chairman, Murray Black, some 16 years ago, listed 14 years ago. And back then, I think I was probably naive as most. The big copper sector, when you put the context of how long it takes to go from a discovery to production at around about 20 years average timeframe now, those were not really things that I appreciated as much as maybe I should have at the beginning of this journey. But look, we've had a fantastic management group that have all shared in one vision for this company, and that was to really build a new force in copper, a large scale champion for the Australian market, and to do that from scratch. So as you said, that has taken a big chunk of my lifetime, and a big chunk of the lifetimes of several of my most loyal lieutenants, Jose Ignacio and a lot of the team that's been very loyal on this journey. So we sit here today with a 1 billion tonne coastal resource base put together from the beginning. Consolidation has been absolutely key in our strategy to own this part of the coastline. And to put that into context, there are not many projects of this scale that sit at 700 metres on the Pan American Highway in the largest copper producing nation of the world, in the middle of infrastructure next to a port, with a pre-feasibility about to come out. There's literally, less projects than I have fingers on one hand that are available outside of the majors. So we sit on, firstly, a very, very large project that is extremely undervalued by the market. We've just spent the last 2.5 years going through a period where we finished up the last major discovery we introduced to the market, which was Cortadera, that enabled us to build this big production hub approach for Costa Fuego, a circa 100,000 tonne per annum fine copper production project, and around 50,000 ounces per annum of gold production. So a very, very good gold output that we're about to deliver on at the end of this quarter with the pre-feasibility. So something akin to the size of an Oz Minerals once in production. So very, very meaningful. And I guess given those timeframes to production, and not many projects sitting in this class at that stage of advancement, very near term. But for the past 2.5 years, the story of Hot Chili has has really been one of the developer. Not exactly the sexy part of the investment cycle for our shareholders, and certainly something that's been weighing on our share price. So, look, much similar to what we did at Productora and Cortadera, years and years it has taken to get the relationships and the conversations with the landowners over another large opportunity that we saw just to the south, 30 kilometres to the south of Costa Fuego. We've been able to secure a project called Verde in the middle of a very large land holding we're building in the south. It's an asset we've had our eyes on for many, many years, and it's never been unified under one ownership. So that's a very, very familiar sound and familiar story for Hot Chili. And now I guess we're sitting this morning with Hot Chili confirming its third major porphyry discovery on this part of the coastline. And it's very unique to have a cluster of such large deposits all close together that can take advantage of central processing and all of the permitting advance that we've gone through on this project. So I guess just before Christmas, we released the first 2 drill holes. They were pretty stunning, sitting right next to an old open pit where originally Hud Bay had drilled a few holes, had never controlled the central open pit. One of those holes was reasonable, but now we're able to put out drill results that completely eclipse anything that was ever done at the property. So discoveries are funny things. You know, they can start from a rock chip 20 years ago. They can move to an open pit that was dug by a private family. They can even progress through to a mid-tier company drilling a couple of holes and clipping the edge of an ore body. And then it comes to the opportunities that we look for, the discoveries that are already made, have just been unrecognised, have never been unified, and they're the ones that we concentrate on, because you effectively skip that entire discovery part of the business, which is sometimes kissing 100 frogs before you find one. So we spend a lot of time to try and get our hands on these things, and when we do, these are the results that we like to see. So this morning, after putting out our first 2 drill holes before Christmas, and some people might not have noticed, it was literally a few days before Christmas, we've now drilled about another 20 holes, and we're confirming a major discovery that's open in all directions and is really the key ingredients for what we saw could take Costa Fuego towards a tier 1 scale, introduce high-grade open pit feed, more of that material into the front end of what we're thinking of doing here, and materially upscale and de-risk this project. So to have something that we're demonstrating is the size of Cortadera, which gave us 700 million tonnes and was a porphyry that extended to 1.2 kilometres, is pretty exciting. But for some of your viewers, even more exciting is when you're putting that on top of a resource base that's already close to 4 million tonnes of fine copper metal and 3 million ounces of gold at 85% indicated, and when you're adding it on top of that, and you have gold credits that are 2 to 3 times the gold credit of our existing resources, we're expecting that our gold resources are going to be growing very rapidly, and we're probably sitting on what is likely to become one of the largest gold resources on the ASX as a credit, but certainly pushing this project into really what is meaningful for the largest companies in the world, and that is a project that can demonstrate a pathway towards a tier 1 asset. There are virtually no tier 1 assets left outside of the hands of the majors. So we've got a very, very large tier 2 asset, but this has now just proven its worth, that we're well on our way towards a 2 billion tonne target. So very, very exciting, Kerry. Hopefully that wasn't too long an introduction.
No, it was great. But one of the things that I wanted to ask you was, you're talking about Verde, 30 kilometres to the south. What I wanted to understand was not why you weren't satisfied with what you had, but why was it important for you to secure? And by the way, ladies and gentlemen, this holding that Hot Chili have got, it didn't come overnight. There was a lot of work, wasn't there, Christian, to pull all this together as a project. But what I want to find out is this third discovery at La Verde, you secured that asset, but why was that important? Why weren't you focusing on what you already had, or did you know something was there? What was the rationale?
I guess, Kerry, we always saw something a lot bigger on this part of the coastline. When we first got here, we looked at this area and we said, why isn't there a tier one asset on this part of the coastline? Two mineralizing features going up the Chilean, the country of Chile. One's up in the high Andes. It's where a lot of our peer projects are that suffer from all of those high capital intensity and high operating costs and much longer timeframes than us to develop the assets. But we were down on the coast, and about every 180 kilometres, like clockwork, there is a tier one asset on the East Atacama fault zone up against the big transfer faults that cross Chile and go into Argentina, and on the Western Fissure Fault up in the high Andes. This was one of the only areas that we recognised didn't have a tier one asset. And when we looked at the ownership, it was completely fragmented. There was the Chilean majors, there was Chilean government organisations, and there was a lot of private land ownership, as well as some of the international companies that were in there. And so really what has been a core strength of myself and Jose Ignacio and the leaders of this company, we've never claimed to have discovered any of these assets. We're not about puffing our chest out and saying, look, we're the company that discovered it. Our skill has been able to develop very long-term relationships with all of the landholders and bring them all together into sensible deals. And those relationship builds have taken years, and it has been an exercise of patience and frustration for our shareholders. But that is how we have built this entire position and gotten our hands on things. And we're not finished, Kerry. This was one of a couple of assets that are left that we've been watching for 10 years and building up our relationships with the owners. So about 6 years on this. Cortadera was actually relatively quick. That was only about 3 years. Productora, that was a similar time frame, 6-7 years to get done. But that's allowed us the ability to actually drill the entire discovery area as one company with complete ownership. And that's been the secret to us unlocking major discoveries. So that's what we saw in La Verde. We saw that 70% of the deposit footprint, which is the similar scale to Cortadera, I think we put some maps out on that today, is covered by gravels, Atacama gravels, shallow 5 metre to 20 metre gravels. So most of it was obscured. And just where there was a little valley, a family had opened up a little open pit and dug the oxides. So what they had exposed was just this tiny window into a very, very large multi-kilometre scale system.
Wow.
And unfortunately for Hud Bay, their approach was very wide-spaced and a real exploration approach. And but look, we've been the benefactor of all of their work and previous explorers' work, and then we were able to consolidate this and put together the ownership like we did with Cortadera and Productora. That's been the key.
Who's Hud Bay?
Hud Bay is a fairly serious mid-tier copper miner in the world, a Canadian copper miner. They own and operate the Constancia operation, very, very large operation up in Peru, and a number of other assets. So certainly in the mid-tier space, probably akin to a bit smaller than Capstone Mining, which the Australian market would know following their dual listing after Australia lost its copper exposure outside of BHP when Oz Minerals was taken over.
So Hud Bay had La Verde before you, is that correct?
Yeah, they did, and we've been speaking to them over many years. We like the asset. They'd been exploring there for many, many years, but had just not cracked the deposit, hadn't put the holes in the right place, but more importantly, couldn't get the land holding that gave access to the centre of the porphyry deposit. And that was key. Yeah. So they were very interested in talking to Hot Chili because, of course, they knew that we've been able to do deals that no one else could do in this area, and had always been very impressed with our deal making ability. So it was always of an interest as to whether Hot Chili could partner with them and then do what they couldn't achieve. But unfortunately, their time ran out, and we were able to move in and put everything together under our ownership.
Well, that is bloody excellent. So well done on that one. Look, there's so many questions going on in my head. My audience will probably turn around and say Chile as a jurisdiction. Help us understand. Clearly you're there. Clearly you have good relationships there. But some people that are sitting watching this might say, oh, not quite sure about Chile. So talk to us about how you're confident in operating there.
Yeah, look, Kerry, when I went to Chile for the first time, I probably had a similar view. Although when I completed my master's in mineral economics, I'd spent some time with a lot of Codelco executives that were going through the same course, and so I had an underlying understanding that it was clearly a tier one mining country. The amount of revenue being made from Chile from mining is, akin to Australia. It's always regarded up there with Australia and Canada as the top three or top four in that grouping. And it's been very, very stable. It's been the home of where most of the majors are investing. If you look at, Australia's flag waver in BHP, the largest mining company and diversified miner in the world, where are they putting their money? And they're putting their money into Chile. 14 billion US going into their Chilean copper development, copper business unit. And that's just about maintaining BHP's existing grip on top two copper producer of the world. So this is where about 25 to 30% of the copper in the world comes from. So it's right at the center of what's going on with electrification. Mm-hmm. And more importantly, I guess, Chile is one of those countries that's been very, very stable. Similar to Australia, where we went through a discussion on super profits tax, and that infected the last cycle, and it started here, and we were being viewed as a potential another banana republic, and I remember that. We were going to socialize the mining industry and take a much bigger chunk of economic rent, and that was luckily voted down. Chile went through a similar crisis of confidence and constitutional discussion and a tax take discussion in the last few years. And Chile came through with flying colours on that, like Australia did. 1% tax change, no changes to the constitution, and business as usual, which is why the majors are throwing a lot of their support into the Chilean industry, and mainly because most of the industry is placing a bet that copper is about to become, in the next few years, the number one metal market in the world and overtake iron ore. So when you see Rio Tinto, when you see BHP Billiton, Vale, even our local high nets in Gina and Andrew Forrest positioning for copper, this is about where the puck is going to be. If I want to borrow some Canadian ice hockey terminology, so. Copper is certainly where everyone is positioning. They're all positioning for large exposure. This is not about scrapping at the side for small, high-grade things that aren't going to be meaningful for a 24 million tonne market, which is going to go to around a 50 million tonne market out to 2050, and a 35 to 40 million tonne market in the next 10 years. That's a lot of copper for the world to supply. You're not going to do it with small deposits. You're going to do it with big deposits, like the projects that Hot Chili is developing. So that's why we're there. That's why Chile is a great jurisdiction to invest. And importantly, over my journey, Kerry, I don't get a lot of questions about Chile as to, is it a good place? Is it safe? It's interesting, over the 16 years that I've been there and living there with my family and spending most of my life with our team in country, it's amazing over the 16 years that now you talk to people in Australia about Chile and they're telling me things. So that's really good to see. that the investors in Australia are recognising where the money flow is going in global exploration, and particularly in copper.